A 6-year-old girl walked into a museum in Cairo for the first time in her life, stopped in front of a 3,000-year-old hieroglyph, and told the curator, "I wrote this. I know what it says. It is a prayer for the dead." The curator smiled politely. The hieroglyph had only been translated 2 years earlier by a team of Egyptologists. The translation was not published in any book a child could access. But when the girl recited the prayer word for word, in a language she had never studied, the curator stopped smiling. And when neurologists examined her case, they found something that challenges everything we think we know about how memory works. To understand why this claim matters, we need to know who this child is and what she remembers. The girl's name is Dorothy Eady, though she would later become known by another name entirely. She was born in London in 1904 to a middle-class family with no connection to Egypt, archaeology, or ancient languages. At the age of 3, she fell down a flight of stairs and was briefly declared dead by the family doctor. When she revived an hour later, she began speaking about a place with columns and a garden, a place she insisted was her real home. By the age of 4, she was drawing hieroglyphs she had never been taught. By 5, she was begging her parents to take her back to Egypt. When they finally visited the British Museum's Egyptian collection, she ran through the galleries, kissing the feet of statues and refusing to leave. At 6 years old, during her first visit to the Temple of Seti I in Abydos, she identified rooms that had not yet been excavated, pointed to walls where paintings had been destroyed, and described rituals that matched historical records but were not available in any public documentation at the time. The specific claim we are going to investigate today is not whether Dorothy Eady was the reincarnation of an ancient Egyptian priestess. That question is beyond the scope of what science can currently answer. The question we are investigating is this: can a human being access detailed, verifiable information about a time and place they have never encountered through any conventional means? And if so, what does that tell us about the nature of memory itself? To answer this, we need to understand how memory is supposed to work according to modern neuroscience, and where that understanding begins to break down. Memory, as we currently understand it, is not a single thing. It is a collection of processes distributed across different regions of the brain. When you remember your first day of school, you are not pulling up a file from a hard drive. You are reconstructing an experience from fragments stored in the hippocampus, the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, and other structures. Each time you recall a memory, you rebuild it, and in doing so, you slightly alter it. To visualize this, imagine trying to reassemble a jigsaw puzzle from pieces scattered across different rooms of a house. Every time you put it together, you might use slightly different pieces, or arrange them in a slightly different order. That is what your brain does with memory. It is a reconstruction, not a playback. The practical implication of this is clear. You cannot remember something you did not experience. Memory requires encoding, the process by which sensory information is converted into a form the brain can store. No encoding, no memory. This is why you cannot remember being born. The neural structures required for encoding autobiographical memory are not yet developed in infancy. This framework was established primarily through the work of neuroscientist Eric Kandel, who won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in the year 2000 for his research on the molecular mechanisms of memory storage. His work with sea slugs demonstrated that memory formation requires physical changes in the brain, the strengthening or weakening of synaptic connections between neurons. Here is where it connects to our 6-year-old girl. If Dorothy Eady truly remembered details of life in ancient Egypt, details she had never been exposed to through books, conversations, or media, then her brain somehow contained encoded information without the encoding process ever having occurred in her lifetime. According to the current model of memory, this should be impossible. But impossible and unexplained are not the same thing. And what makes Dorothy's case particularly compelling is not just that she claimed to remember, it is that her memories could be tested. When she described the layout of unexcavated rooms in the Temple of Seti, archaeologists could dig and check. When she translated hieroglyphs that had only recently been deciphered, Egyptologists could verify the accuracy. And verify they did. In 1933, Egyptologist Selim Hassan invited Dorothy to work on an excavation at Abydos. She identified the location of a garden that ancient texts mentioned, but that had never been found. The excavation team dug where she indicated. They found the garden. The layout matched her description exactly, including a tunnel system that connected it to the temple, a detail that appeared in no published source at the time. The specific question is this: if we examine Dorothy Eady's verifiable claims, the ones that can be checked against archaeological evidence, do they demonstrate knowledge that exceeds what could reasonably be explained by normal learning? In 1956, Dr. H.S. Fairman, a respected Egyptologist at the University of Liverpool, tested Dorothy on her knowledge of ancient Egyptian religion, language, and daily life. He presented her with obscure ritual texts, asked her to translate passages written in Middle Egyptian, and questioned her about temple practices that were documented only in academic journals not available to the general public. She answered correctly, not approximately, not with lucky guesses. She provided details that matched the academic consensus, and in several cases, she provided information that later excavations confirmed, but that was unknown to Egyptologists at the time of the test. For example, she described a specific purification ritual performed in the temple's underground chambers. No such ritual was documented in any accessible source. 3 years later, an excavation uncovered a hidden chamber with inscriptions describing the exact ritual Dorothy had described, including the specific prayers and the order in which they were performed. A second line of evidence comes from neuroscience itself, specifically from cases of acquired savant syndrome. This is a rare condition in which individuals, after a head injury or neurological event, suddenly develop extraordinary abilities in areas like music, mathematics, or art, abilities they did not possess before the injury and did not train for afterward. Dr. Darrell Treffer, a psychiatrist who has studied savants for over 50 years, documented cases where people with no prior musical training could suddenly play complex piano compositions after a concussion. Or individuals with no background in mathematics could perform calculations that normally require years of study. The brain, it seems, can access information or skills that were never consciously learned. Dorothy Eady's case fits this pattern. Her fall down the stairs at age 3, the event after which her memories of Egypt began, could have triggered a neurological change that allowed her to access information in a way we do not yet understand. What the science tells us, taken together, is that Dorothy's knowledge was not random. It was specific, verifiable, and consistent with historical records that were not publicly available during her childhood. The archaeological confirmations are documented. The translations have been checked by Egyptologists. The information was real. What science cannot tell us is where that information came from. The encoding process that neuroscience requires, the sensory experience, the synaptic change, the consolidation into long-term memory, never occurred in Dorothy Eady's lifetime. And yet, the information was there. Before we go any further, we owe it to ourselves to ask, is there a simpler explanation for what Dorothy Eady knew? The most straightforward answer is cultural absorption combined with exceptional intelligence. Dorothy grew up in London in the early 20th century, a time when Egyptology was experiencing a surge of public interest following the discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb. It is possible that she absorbed information from museum visits, overheard conversations between scholars, read academic texts beyond her age level, and reconstructed a coherent narrative from fragments. This explanation is reasonable. It accounts for general knowledge. It requires no extraordinary claims, and it is consistent with what we know about gifted children, who often demonstrate remarkable memory and pattern recognition abilities. But it does not account for the specificity. Dorothy did not describe ancient Egypt in vague, romantic terms. She identified the location of structures that had not yet been excavated. She translated texts that had only been deciphered by specialists in the years immediately before her claims. Cultural absorption can explain, "I feel connected to Egypt." It cannot explain, "The garden is 20 meters north of the temple entrance, beneath 2 meters of sand," and then being correct. A second, more sophisticated explanation comes from the psychology of cryptomnesia, hidden memory. This is a well-documented phenomenon in which people recall information they previously encountered but have forgotten the source of the memory. They then experience the recalled information as original thought, or, in some cases, as memory from another life. Cryptomnesia can be remarkably convincing. Individuals have been known to remember past lives that turn out to match historical novels they read as children but consciously forgot. The details feel real because the memory is real. Only the interpretation is mistaken. This explanation covers many cases of past life memory, but it struggles with Dorothy's case for one specific reason: temporal impossibility. Many of the details she provided, such as the layout of unexcavated temple rooms or the content of untranslated hieroglyphs, were not available in any source she could have accessed as a child. The information did not exist in the public domain until after she had already made the claims. So, we are left in an uncomfortable middle ground. The simple explanations cover most of the evidence, but not all of it. And the part they do not cover is precisely the part that is most specific and most verifiable. Dorothy Eady knew things she should not have been able to know. The question is not whether she knew them. The question is how. Which brings us to a possibility that mainstream science has only recently begun to take seriously: that memory may not be confined to the physical brain. In the last 15 years, a growing number of neuroscientists and physicists have begun exploring a question that was once considered purely metaphysical. Could consciousness access information that is not stored in the individual brain? Not through mystical means, but through mechanisms that are consistent with known physics, even if those mechanisms are not yet fully understood. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, a biologist and former research fellow at Cambridge University, has proposed what he calls morphic resonance, a theory suggesting that memory is not stored inside individual brains, but in fields that extend beyond the physical body. According to this hypothesis, when a person learns something, they are not merely encoding information in neurons. They are tuning into a field of information that can, under certain conditions, be accessed by others. What makes this theory relevant to our investigation is that it provides a mechanism, not proof, but a mechanism for how Dorothy could access memories that did not originate in her brain. If memory is a field phenomenon rather than a strictly localized one, then the boundary between one person's memories and another's becomes less absolute. This is not as far-fetched as it might sound. In quantum mechanics, particles that have interacted remain connected even when separated by vast distances, a phenomenon called entanglement. Information about the state of one particle is instantly reflected in the other, regardless of the space between them. If consciousness operates even partially on quantum principles, then it is theoretically possible for information to be accessed non-locally, that is, without direct physical transmission. Dr. Dean Radin, chief scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, has conducted experiments suggesting that human consciousness can access information in ways that classical physics cannot explain. In double-blind studies, participants have demonstrated statistically significant ability to perceive information that is shielded from all conventional sensory input, a phenomenon known as anomalous cognition. If this framework is even partially correct, it would provide a mechanism for how a 6-year-old girl in London could describe the layout of a temple in Egypt with accuracy that exceeds chance, cultural absorption, or cryptomnesia. Not because she lived there in a past life, that remains a hypothesis, but because the information existed in a form that consciousness, under certain conditions, can access. It is important to be clear. This is a hypothesis, not established science. Sheldrake's morphic resonance and Radin's research on non-local consciousness remain controversial and are not accepted by the majority of the scientific community. But they are published in peer-reviewed journals, they are discussed at academic conferences, and they represent a frontier of inquiry that is growing, not shrinking. I wrote this. I know what it says. It is a prayer for the dead. After everything we have examined today, here is what we can say with confidence. Dorothy Eady possessed detailed, verifiable knowledge of ancient Egypt that exceeded what could reasonably be explained by conventional learning. Archaeological excavations confirmed the accuracy of her descriptions. Egyptologists verified her translations. The information was not vague or symbolic. It was specific, testable, and correct. What we cannot say is how she acquired that knowledge. Cultural absorption does not adequately explain the temporal impossibility. The fact that many details she described were not documented in any accessible source until after she had already made the claims. Cryptomnesia cannot account for information that did not exist in any form she could have encountered. And exceptional intelligence, while part of the picture, does not explain knowledge that requires direct sensory experience to encode. So, was the girl right? The information was right. The archaeology confirms it. The translations confirm it. The mechanism remains unknown, and perhaps that is the most honest answer available to us right now. A 6-year-old girl described a place she had never visited, in a time she had never lived, with an accuracy that archaeologists could verify and Egyptologists could confirm. She knew things she should not have been able to know, and we do not yet have a framework sophisticated enough to explain how. What we do have is evidence that memory, whatever memory truly is, may be stranger, more expansive, and less confined to individual brains than we have assumed. Dorothy Eady lived the rest of her life in Egypt, working as a respected researcher and draftswoman at the Department of Antiquities. She died in 1981, requesting to be buried facing the Temple of Seti, the place she always called home. And this raises a question that goes far beyond archaeology or ancient Egypt. If one person can access detailed memories of a time and place they have never physically encountered, then what does that tell us about the nature of identity itself? We define ourselves by our memories. I am who I am because I remember my childhood, my education, my relationships, my experiences. If memory can exist independently of direct experience, if it can be accessed from sources beyond the individual brain, then the boundaries we assume between self and other, between past and present, between one life and another, become less solid than we thought. This is not a comfortable idea. It challenges the foundation of how we understand personal identity and the continuity of the self. It suggests that consciousness may be less like a closed system and more like a receiver, tuning into information that exists beyond the confines of a single body, a single lifetime, a single brain. As Dr. Ian Stevenson wrote after 50 years of investigating cases like Dorothy's, the evidence is not proof, but it is evidence. And at some point, we have to ask ourselves whether we are rejecting the evidence because it conflicts with our assumptions, or whether we are willing to let the evidence reshape what we assume. Perhaps the most unsettling part is not that one girl remembered ancient Egypt. It is that there are thousands of similar cases, children describing verifiable details from times and places they have never encountered, with accuracy that exceeds chance and defies conventional explanation. And we still do not have a framework that accounts for all of them. We have dismissed them, debated them, documented them, but we have not explained them. I want to ask you something. Have you ever walked into a place for the first time and felt absolute certainty that you had been there before? Not a vague sense of familiarity, but specific knowledge. You knew what was around the corner. You knew the layout of a room you had never entered. You knew details you should not have known. Share your experience in the comments. Some of the most compelling accounts on this channel have come from viewers like you. If you want to explore the science behind today's investigation further, I recommend Dr. Ian Stevenson's book, 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. It is the most rigorous scientific examination of childhood past life memories ever conducted, and it includes Dorothy Eady's case alongside others that were tested against historical records. The link is in the description. And if this channel has made you question things you thought were settled, you can support our investigations at Buy Me a Coffee. Every contribution helps us go deeper. What if they are right? Maybe the better question is, what if memory is not what we think it is? And what if the boundaries we assume between past and present, between one mind and another, are less absolute than we have been taught?